So the topic I'm going to discuss today is like API management and service mesh and Kubernetes. So I think, should I give a bit of background of this or just quickly? So I got involved to do this talk like a couple of days ago, so I didn't have much time to prepare. So I'm just still going to try and share some insights about how you can use API management and service mesh together. So guys, I'm from Stakater. Currently, I'm the CEO of the company. We deeply specialize in Kubernetes as a platform, but we are an engineering organization. Been doing, I would say, Docker for very long and Kubernetes for the last 7 years and stuff like that. So we help companies across Kubernetes adoption, I would say, be it in development or engineering or operations around that. I just want to skip these slides, but this is what we do. We do a lot of like consulting as well as managed services and everything around that. But primarily, our key stuff, what we do is Kubernetes. And then today I'm going to talk about API management and service mesh based on our experience running Kubernetes and how you can use both together. Before I start, I want to use, if people can raise hands, how many of you are using API management solutions in production? Okay, a bunch of you, good. How many are using service mesh in production? Okay, we have few, so I think you guys can learn something new today from me. And anyone using Kubernetes in production? Oh, should I ask, who's not using Kubernetes in production? Okay, this is good. And anyone using these technologies together, service mesh and API management? Oh, we have one, that's good, 2. So you guys can help me, right? If I say something wrong, you can tell me. Good, let's start, I hope all of you know what are APIs and microservices, but I will still do a quick round there just to set my story around that. Then I will talk about how you identify the traffic directions, like domain boundaries. And then I would say how you can deploy API management and service mesh solutions together. And then I have an example that I can show you guys. If my system is live, I can do it live. Otherwise, I will just give you a walkthrough. I have just 20 minutes. So, but feel free to ask me questions, stop me. Okay, so it's no problem. Just not let me go ahead and discuss. But I assume all of you guys know what are like APIs. And I think sometimes we get confused. We think every microservice we build is an API. Okay, you can say like that. But you have to think in terms of API that you want to sell, right? There are companies who just sell APIs, just sell APIs, like API is everything that they have. So they might have tons of microservices behind the scenes, but they might just sell you an API. So I think it's very important to understand what is an API that you are trying to build, and is that an API that can be used within your organization, or if this API can be sold to anyone else outside the organization as well. It's good to understand, to set the definition of what is an API. Microservices, I'm sure all of us are doing it. Okay, there's no single definition. How big a microservice could be. It could be small, it could be big, it could be macroservice or microservice. But it's important to understand the difference between a microservice and an API. Like, okay, I'm building a microservice. Is that an API that I want to expose to my end customers? And end customers could be internal to the organization, or it could be external to the organization. What is an API management solutions? There are tons of API management solutions out there, but it's like a common problem if you're building an API, and if you want to expose that API, you will have same set of problems. You might want to monetize that API. You might want to have a developer portal for that API, or you want to have some sort of, would say, some policies around that API, some who want to access the API. So you have these common problems, that everyone has to solve. And then I think those kind of problems, since they're very generic, has resulted into a bunch of API gateways that you can go and find out in the market, But all of them are actually trying to cover the same set of, I would say, use case, monetization, ecosystem creation, partner outreach, and onboarding, Same set of problems. Rather than everyone building their own, you can go and choose an API management solution. And what do API management solutions provide? They can provide a lot of set of features: authentication, authorization, security, developer portals, API lifecycle management, API monetization. So there could be many more features, but these are like common use cases that are covered by the API management portals, or solutions that companies use APIs for, or API solutions for. And who should use API management solutions? I think anyone who's trying to build an API solution that you want to expose to someone else to consume it, you should look into API management solutions. They solve a lot of problems for you, like common problems that might one think, I want to do it myself, but then you realize, oh, but this is a common problem. Others have solved it already, so you guys can use it. But I assume you guys are in API management, so all of you guys know why are you here. Service mesh, Okay, what is service mesh, So service mesh is basically when you have to do this service-to-service communication, when we are building a lot of microservices, we have common problems, So previously, we used to build monolithics, and I still love monolithics because I think we are just building microservices to make our life harder. But yeah, they have a benefit as well. But when you build microservices, there's a lot of common challenges that you have. OK, my service A is going to talk with service B. How do I ensure they're going to talk securely, Or is it open on the network, Anyone within the cluster, for example, if it's Kubernetes, anyone in the cluster can just talk to my service, within the same namespace or different namespaces. And then when you have so many microservices that you have broken down your application into small pieces, you want to have a better observability, right? Who's talking to whom at what time, and how long it takes for me to go call service B and service A and stuff like that, And of course, and similarly, you might want to have use cases, can I actually have released like 2 versions of my service at the same time, A and B, and can I do like alpha beta testing at the same time? So they're like common use cases again that we had when we were building microservices, Previously, or still you can do it. You can inject a sidecar. You can have a library within your code base that can help you do these things. But since it's a common problem, why don't go and look for a solution? So we have lots of open source solutions available to do service mesh. But it's about service-to-service communication. When you're running within a cluster, you can span it to across clusters as well. Benefits, of course. You can have a lot of enhanced security, decentralized control, flexibility, and stuff like that. Here's a typical example how it looks like when you have a service mesh running. You have what we call a data plane, and then you have what we call a control plane. When you're running any kind of service mesh solution, you have these 2 kind of planes within your environment, be it any Kubernetes environment. This is how it will look like. And then the idea with the sidecar, or with the service mesh, is that instead of you updating your microservice to include all those logics or all of those needs, for example, like observability, routing, security, you rather rely on something from the platform, some sort of service mesh solution that can actually do it for you, and it runs as a sidecar. And a question could be, what is a sidecar? All of you are familiar with containers? Yeah, exactly. So when you run a pod in a Kubernetes, you can run one or many containers. So one of your containers could be your application, and anything that you can run with the side could be a sidecar container. And sidecar containers can be used for all the traffic that goes through it or goes out of your container. It can take care of anything that you configure it for it. Okay, ensure MTLS, please log the request, do this, do authentication for me. It can do everything for you. So you can offload the common needs that you have in your application development to this sidecar, which is generic, and it can take care of stuff for you. And the best part is, with these new techniques, the sidecars are now programmable. So it's called WebAssembly execution. I'll talk briefly about that. So now this is, I would say, a big game changer. You can just extend that sidecar to be a bit more generic to do stuff for you. And who uses service mesh is ideal for development teams that need service, like service-to-service communication when you're running stuff within your clusters. Okay, this is a high-level diagram because people might find out, okay, there are some similarities, and of course there are some similarities, but then there are also some differences between the 2 solutions. Like you have API management solutions and you have service mesh solutions. So if you look in the middle, you can do rate limiting policies and security by both of these solutions, but then there are some things that can be only are offered by one of these solutions. Because people sometimes think, okay, we don't need service mesh because we use API management solutions, but that is not the case. You need to use both because they offer different set of features. If you look at API management, you can do monetization, as I mentioned, documentation, partner ecosystem. But if you would talk about on the right side with service mesh, you can do observability, kiosk testing, traffic routing. So a lot of customers that we work with, they use service mesh a lot, primarily for security reasons, traffic routing, and observability. I mean, it's brilliant, actually, when you're running it in the cluster. And if you enable properly service mesh, you can have a very good visibility within your environments, who's talking to who and how, and how long it takes for A to go to B and get back the response. No questions, I assume? Good. Let's talk a bit about what is a north-south traffic, east-west traffic, domain boundaries, and interdomain versus intradomain traffic. So I think the first thing that you have to identify is the kind of traffic you have within your environment. So it's called north-south traffic, which is basically something from the outside that clients trying to access your services is basically considered as a north-south traffic. And then you have something called east-west traffic that is between the cluster. Service A wants to talk with service B. So you have to kind of identify your patterns of traffic that you're building, like applications you're building. Okay, what kind of traffic do we have? And then you have to also kind of understand the enterprise boundary. How many of you know domain-driven designing? Okay, awesome. I will highly recommend you guys, if you are doing API development or anything around that, there are very nice books available on what's called DDD, domain-driven designing. They are brilliant, actually. They will really help you how you should break down your application into really proper boundaries. So take a look. So if you look here in this diagram, it's like we have applications, we have a bigger context, and then we have small boxes. And then if you look here, that this is like different color. Like this is out boundary, is a domain boundary. Then you have intra-domain connection and inter-domain connection. So intra-domain, within the domain, you have connections. And then you have outer domain, you have with someone else, like it's called inter-domain, I would say, communication. So that's a blue-colored one. So this could be within the same organization that you want to do, running within the same cluster with multiple clusters. But you have to identify the kind of pattern that you have. Okay, we are a team, we are building a service. And then we have another team who's building a service, and we need to communicate. Yeah, you can use service mesh for that to say, okay, you have to authenticate. Or you could also use API management for that. You say, okay, although we are in the same organization, but you want to consume my service, but I have to apply some certain rate limits on you. You have to follow some patterns, stuff like that. So maybe you feel like, okay, I have to go for some sort of API management solution. And this is, like the interdomain traffic, which goes back to what we call about, north and south traffic. And then intradomain traffic is about the east-west traffic. So it's very important to understand for you guys, as a takeaway from here, is, okay, what kind of traffic communication we're talking about, who's talking to who, And then try to figure out, okay, should I use service mesh solution here for the problem, or should I use an API management solution here for the problem? So finding the right solutions, so if you look at API management solutions, they can provide you with API lifecycle management, developer portal options, policies, monetizations. And if you look about from service mesh, it provides you, like microservices lifecycle management, cross-infrastructure support, and of course, kind of developer, support. But both of these solutions kind of provide, as I mentioned in the other diagram, some unique set of features actually that others doesn't offer. So you can definitely use both together, not like it's versus it's and actually. Let's take a look from a concrete example perspective. This is an example. Let's say you want to build up some sort of, it's an example of a travels organization which offers you to pick up, choose a hotel, car service, flights, and insurance. And this is their current architecture, that they have built lots of microservices here, flights, hotel, cars, insurance discounts, and they have built an API called travels. So that's why I said, everything that you build is not an API. It could be microservices, but what you want to expose could be an API, like a travels, because API is what you want to sell, what you want to monetize. and you want to abstract away your microservices architecture behind a well-defined API. So in this case, let's assume travel is an API that they want to sell. Now assume they got a requirement. Let's say they got these requirements. Okay, so manage the access of the core travel services from the online channels, traffic management, end-to-end observability, monitor and trace requests, enforce a zero trust network security. So these guys had an application like this that was running. Now they plan to expand, and they got these requirements, let's say, from security guy. Okay? So now I have a question. How would you guys achieve that? What will you do? So anyone have any idea what will they do? If you got these requirements and you had this running application already, and they say go live in 1 month or 2 weeks, 1 week. Service mesh or, Ethan? Okay, yeah, that's one thing. Okay, anyone else? Okay, no problem. I can tell you guys. Don't worry. I mean, it was not exam. Come on. I mean, we can interact, right? So to make it more interesting. Otherwise, it's one way. So, okay. So this is how you can do it. So like one way. I mean, I have an example. I say OpenShift. It's a Kubernetes distribution. So don't say it only works in OpenShift. It's just a Kubernetes. But everything else, let's see how you can do it. Or how you can do it is you can use service mesh for that. So service mesh is not just one technology, okay? Service mesh is a collection of open source solutions. You have an Istio, which is a sidecar injection technique. You have Jaeger, and you have Kiali. These are like open source tools. You guys can just go and deploy and run them. So it's not like, so I'm not selling any product here, guys. So just, so these are open source solutions. And what you can do is, if you look at the other diagram, you might have seen something has popped up, like there's a difference, right? If you look in this diagram, they're like a sidecars, right? You see those purple-colored boxes on the side? So what we have done is we have enabled service mesh without modifying the code. We have enabled service mesh on the cluster level. And we have injected sidecars with all of the applications, all of the microservices. Travels is an API, just everything else is a microservice, And with the help of this, we are actually able to achieve those 5 requirements, that I listed above. Because Istio will give me TLS. It will ensure all the traffic within the cluster, within the services, it can be even MTLS, the mutual TLS between the 2 parties. So you can configure Istio how you want it to do, and it will do it for you. And it will give me observability. How does it give me observability? You know how? Yeah, exactly. Because you have a sidecar. All the traffic that gets to your application has to bypass this sidecar. And that sidecar just, lists or write down the trace, Okay, someone from here called me here, and the request came in this time and went out at this time. So you get a traceability. You get a data about it, how long it took for a call to go. So you get all of that information without modifying your code. Okay, without modifying your code, okay, just like this. So it's because for traces we have to modify the code bit, But yeah, everything else I can achieve without modifying the code. So I can achieve those requirements, So all of these requirements are met in this solution without modifying the code. Okay, now comes the next requirement. Your boss comes to you and say, okay, open this up for external partners now. You have built an awesome API. Expose it to end partners now. What can you do now? You can tell your boss, okay, open up your Pocket wallet, buy us a big API management solution, or we can try some open source one. Yeah, of course, they are built for that purpose, So what you can use API gateways. So here I have shown you one of the API gateways, but you have many. You have Kong, you have API-G, you have 3Scale. So if you look at this diagram now, it's a bit that you have partner portals, and then what you can do is you can deploy one of the API gateway solutions. You can configure them as code now. They are really brilliant. If you guys are into the world of as code everything, like README-driven development, API-first development, so you can do everything as code. So these tools, they offer you to offer as code, you can actually say, OK, expose my travels API to outside world, to my partner portals. They have a developer portal. They can access it via an API key. They can do everything around that. So it's time to stop. Oh, time to stop, guys. So I have to speed up. Just give me 1 more minute. But then, of course, you have another requirement. It says, like all of the traffic should be secure. And with them, so what you can do, as I mentioned, if you look here on the API, I have injected something called a WASM plugin. So WASM is something now really catching up the fire now. It's called WebAssembly. You can say next generation Docker world. But what you can do is you can program like small modules in JavaScript, for example, and you can inject them on the fly. And what this can do, this can talk to the API management solution, and it can check, is this user allowed to talk to me? Does this user, is it crossing the rate limits or anything around that? So it's like you can really extend a lot here. Good. Question and answers, right? I'm almost on time, right? So.
Woo! Thanks, Rasheed.